This is in.
So I'll call this meeting of the Texada Regional District Finance Committee for April 20th, 2022 to order. Recognize that this meeting is taking place in the traditional territories of the Cullen people who have occupied and lived here for many thousands of years. So we'll get right into the agenda. Does anybody have any changes or amendments to the agenda they want to make? Maybe a motion to approve would be a nice thing. Ravazan, seconded by Director McCormick. Any discussion? All in favor of accepting the agenda? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. To the adoption of minutes of the Finance Committee meeting on February 16, 2022. Omissions. Motion to accept the minutes. Director McCormick, seconded by Director Brander. Any discussion on that? All those in favor of accepting the minutes as circulated? Any opposed? Carried unanimously as well. That brings us down to item 4.1, delegations and inquiries. We have Arthur Arnold from the Pacific Region International Summer Music Association, PRISMA, 2021 annual report. Come on up and do your business.
Want me to sit here?
That would be lovely. We can better seen on the camera when we do that.
Thanks, and thanks for having me, and thanks once again for the ongoing support from the regional district for PRISMA. That's highly appreciated. It is it's important to have the support of all the local governments. The granting agencies always ask in their applications, do you get local support, do you get government support? And they value that in the approval of other funds that we get. So your dollars are very important to us, but also the fact that you support PRISMA is very important. So thank you for that. Today I visited Kelly Creek School and had a lovely time with 3 groups of each 2 classes, from the youngest ones, age 5, to the older kids. And with all of them, we talked according to their level of thinking very carefully about the war that basically we are in as Canada and as the Netherlands. And what we did is I played for them the Ukraine national anthem, and the kids held hands, and they thought of other kids there that lost someone, or that lost a pet, or that lost their teddy bear. Or I try to make it not too dramatic, but yet create awareness of how important it is that we live in freedom. And the kids started sharing spontaneously losses in their lives. As young as they are, that went from a cat or a dog to dead. And so we created, there was a very safe environment to create this. And this is something that music can do. And I saw so first hands-on how music connected us all. And I asked, I told the kids, look, in Holland, you have this big painting on the wall. It's like as big as this wall, and it's called The Night Watch by Rembrandt. And then in Paris, you have these little paintings, as little as that painting there, and a picture there, and it's called the Mona Lisa. And they're worth so much, and they wouldn't allow me, but if I could, and I could take that off the wall, the Mona Lisa, that one is too big, but the Mona Lisa, I could take it home. I could put it in a grocery bag or in a suitcase. And I said, but no, I just played for you this music. Where is it? You cannot hold it. You cannot put it in a case. One kid says, you can record it. I said, yes, and then you push record. and then it's over. And then where is it? And another kid says, it's in my heart. Well, that was so beautiful. And that's the quintessence of you know, all the things we do through music, connect this community, welcome students from all over the world, give them a little bit of the peace we have here together. And it's not a given everywhere, as we all know. So they bring that home. And when I came for the first time in Fall River in the year 2000, I was struck by the hospitality and the warmth. And I still am. That's something we do. And I think that's very important in these times. So I hope, I count on you to continue the support for PRISMA. And it goes farther than putting on some entertainment. Thank you.
Directors, any questions or comments? Director Brander.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to comment. I really appreciate everything that you've done, especially during the last couple of years. And my wife's class was one of the ones you were entertaining today and communing with. So I just want to say I really appreciate all the efforts you've made.
Thank you.
Director McCormick.
Thank you. Not a question, but I was very touched by your story. And I hope you can always continue to do good stuff with your music. I think that's terrific.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And that's the most important thing, right? We can do the circus act and play fast or whatever, but it's not about that.
Yeah.
It's such a tool. So thank you.
That's very cool. Thank you.
Anyone else? I don't see any other hands up, but I want to say thank you for coming. The agenda item says you have the 2021 annual report for PRISMA, and we have it in front of us. We have a hard copy, which I put in my briefcase, and I have the whole 15 pages on the agenda. And if anybody wants to go through the entire report, they can access it through the regional district's website on today's finance committee agenda, and they can look at it. I want to say thank you for bringing music to the region, because as you say, music brings us together, and we need it at times like this. So thank you for your presentation, and hope to see you again many times this year.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye. So that takes us, there is no unfinished business that I'm aware of. That brings us to correspondence. Correspondence April 1st, 2022 from Rebecca Bishop, the Union of BC Municipalities Community Resiliency Investment Project, FireSmart Community Funding. Your pleasure.
I'll move receipt.
Motion to receive, seconded by Director Brander. Any discussion? Checks in the mail. All those in favor? Always nice to get a check. Carried unanimously. Speaking of checks, we have correspondence dated April 13th, 2022 from Nathan Cullen, Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Infrastructure Planning Grant Program Approval. Seconder for the motion to receive, Director Leishman. Any discussion? Talking about the project that this is going to fund a little bit later in the agenda. All those in favor? Any opposed? Very unanimous. We're at item 7.1 to consider Texada Gillies Bay Airport Wildlife Fencing Project financing options. So the staff member who wants to introduce this report before we go to the director.
Thank you, Chair. No presentation with the report, but happy to answer any questions anyone may have.
Okay, so Director McCormick.
Thank you. I would move the first paragraph up to the word and a slightly different wording for the second paragraph that I've given to the corporate officer already. And that is that the committee postpone recommending an option until June to receive input from the Texada Airport Advisory Committee.
We have a seconder for that motion.
I'll second that.
Seconded by Director Fall. Any discussion? McCormick.
Thank you. It's a significant decision in choosing of the various options that have been put forward for doing the referendum. And the Airport Advisory Committee has a meeting scheduled for the 15th of May, which is only really a couple of weeks from now. So I think it's very important. They haven't met for a very long time, and it's important to hear their input regarding this matter before we consider which option we're going to recommend to the board. So that's why I'm recommending receipt of the document, but postponing the decision until after we've heard feedback. And I hope staff can arrange to have that feedback presented at the same June meeting.
Okay, anyone else? Mr. CAO.
Through the chair, just for clarification, we've got time for any referenda.
Thank you, through the chair.
Go ahead.
Yeah, that should work for the, getting the question on a ballot.
Thank you.
Okay, it's probably cutting it a little fine for the referendum, but we've taken a few days to think this through already, apparently. We don't see any other hands, so all those in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. Brings us already to item 7.2, the wastewater utility system acquisition policy. Staff members want to speak about that.
Again, thank you through the chair. No presentation with this one, but here to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Okay, any questions?
I'll move the recommendation.
Okay, I have a seconder for the recommendation, Director Leishman. Any discussion? Director Gisborne.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
I read through the report. There is a little bit that I find concerning. And it comes from what I heard from other local governments where a developer will put in a water or sewer system and then hand it over to local government. And I seem to recall in the staff report that they would give a 5% deposit, for future infrastructure upgrades. However, quite often the developer is looking for a quick return on investment, and 5% might not be sufficient as the life of that infrastructure goes forward for asset management. That can cause headaches down the line. One local government I heard took on a septic system and later found out that the septic tank wasn't connected to anything. That was a big problem. The other issue is concerns over urban sprawl. We have had some conversations about regional growth strategies, urban containment boundaries. But if developers start putting in subdivisions and water systems and sewer systems with the expectation that, well, we can now try and get the local government to take it over in the future, that's where I kind of have some concerns. So I'm just wondering, is it possible to increase the amount that the developer would have to deposit for new builds, going from 5%, maybe up to 15%, 25%, something like that? Is that something that's available through this, through such a policy? And when we do get a regional growth strategy and an urban containment boundary, hopefully, I'm jumping the gun a little, would that be something that we could then add to this policy in the future? So those are my two questions. And I see Melissa Howie is ready to answer. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, and I'll ask staff to respond.
Thank you, through the chair. There are a few mechanisms within the policy that I think can be used to address some concerns with new development. A new development would follow the same process as any existing development, which includes a very comprehensive utility assessment report that would need to be done. And it could be expected that that report would reveal any deficiencies with the system. So there is that can be relied on. There is also the requirement of a bond, a 2-year deficiency bond that would need to be posted with that acquisition. So if anything did come up within that 2-year framework, that bond would be there to address any of those concerns. And then the policy itself can be certainly reviewed and updated and changed in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Fong.
Thank you, Chair. I'd first like to thank Ms. Howie for bringing this forward. I think it's obviously a lot of work went into it, and it lays out a lot of issues. And I think the checklist really shows how the approval process, to allay some concerns raised by Director Gisborne, that it's clear to anyone who embarks on this, any improvement district or private developer, that there's these several steps where the board makes decisions, and so there's no guarantee. So there's no way anyone could be under the impression that they can force us, the regional district, to take on a utility. The board decides at each step, and if conditions aren't met, the board can say meet these conditions, or they can say no. I just have a comment and a question, and maybe it's kind of more like two questions. When I was looking through I was looking at section 6.3, self-sustaining service, and it says, under the Local Government Act, the QRD will manage utilities as a standalone service. So I was thinking about two pieces. One is, first of all, this more of a grammatical thing. Should that say you manage each utility as a standalone service, as opposed to utilities as a standalone service? Because it's, as I understand, it's each utility would be its own service, and that started making me, and that'd be a minor change in my mind, but if that's correct. But I was wondering about if that's the case, there may be situations where we're merging utilities, and maybe if is how we might comment on how that might work. And I was trying to just, maybe it's new to me, so I'm trying to figure out how this works in terms of existing utility systems. Someone approaches us, it may make sense that becomes its own standalone service, and it may make sense that it gets merged with another service, existing utility service, if we're, for example, going to connect them together or share something or something like that. So if there's a clarification on that, would really help me. Thanks.
Ms. Howie, do you have an answer for that complicated question?
Thank you. Through the chair, yes, I appreciate you pointing that out. I think adding that word each utility in that section would help provide that additional clarification. And there may be a scenario in the future where an existing utility that the QRD has, and then one looking to join it might be an appropriate scenario. I think that would still be looked at as an acquisition and would still need to follow through the same process. The policy, though, has not specifically addressed two already existing utilities that would join together. I think that would be a bit of a different process than simply an acquisition of a utility that the QRD does not already own.
Right. So it's like we had to go through this policy to acquire, and then it would be a separate process to say now we're going to merge services or something like that.
I believe that would be appropriate. Yes.
That makes sense. Thank you for answering my complicated question.
Dr. Brabazon.
No, Ms. Howie has answered all the questions raised. I think this document is excellent. Long overdue, but we here at this table are as much to blame for that as anybody. So I like it. I'm just so glad to see it.
I've got one question and a comment, I guess, a couple of comments. The first one is when I look through the checklist and the conditions for starting an application, one of the requirements is that the electoral area director be in favor of the project. Is that absolutely necessary for it to proceed, or is the fact that electoral area representative might not approve of the acquisition of a water system going to veto it and stop it from happening?
Through the chair, thank you for that. I think there is some selective wording in there. If we come back to the grammar, that the expression of interest may include that. So it is not an absolute requirement that it is included. And through the checklist at the end of that expression of interest process, those pieces would go forward to the board for the board's review and discussion and decision, if the application would then proceed to the next step.
Great. I just want to make sure I understood that correctly. The way you've explained it is appropriate. I think it's a really good policy. It gives all the information I think the board should need to weigh and make a decision on whether or not it's a smart thing and a good thing for the regional district to do, to take over the system, making sure that we've got inspections and evaluations of the system. We know what it's going to cost in the future, and we've got sufficient reserves to cover it. Makes eminent sense to me. I think it's a great policy and I support it. Anyone else? Dr. Gisborne.
Oh, thank you. I'm still hung up a bit on the asset management portion. What is the rough year-to-year investment that we should be putting aside for asset management for our existing water and sewer systems? If hopefully our staff can have an answer. Myrtle Pond, Lund sewer system, that kind of thing.
Does staff have an answer for that off the cuff? Ms. Greena?
Thank you, Chair. We don't have a magic number for the right amount of reserves we're putting aside. It all depends on the condition of the asset and the lifespan of the asset. So it isn't a hard number. It doesn't apply to every asset. So I think it would depend specifically on the asset and then the life cycle of each of the components.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Greenan. Yeah, I see that there's the 10% new development utility system, and that's for tangible capital assets for a 2-year warranty term. But the policy also requires a developer to provide 5% of the value of the tangible capital assets to establish a reserve fund for long-term capital replacement. 5% to me, it just seems really small. And I'm thinking about the unintended consequences of, where a developer is, giving 5%, which isn't much. And yeah, would it be possible to have that changed before we adopt this? Maybe go up to 15%, 20%, just for new development utilities? Would that be a possibility?
Through the chair, I'd also maybe point out that there would be an agreement that would be made at the end of the process. There is a legal agreement to acquire a utility, and perhaps given the exploration, the comprehensive utility assessment is done that would reveal, the condition as well as make its own recommendations of reserves, that perhaps within that agreement, if there are extenuating circumstances for that particular utility, that it could be addressed in that agreement.
Yeah, that's for, I think, special cases. But the standard of a developer putting into development, we see this all over the place where, they in the municipality, they'll put in roads and sewer and water systems. And then the developer sells the lots and off they go. But it's the local government that's stuck holding the bag of asset management and capital replacement, which can become quite expensive over, the future of its use. So that's my concern, but I'll think more about it, talk to other local government individuals that I heard having issues, and maybe come up with an idea at the board. No further questions. Thank you, Chair.
Director Brander.
Thanks, Chair. I was just curious, going through the chair back to Ms. Howie, where the 5% came from. I imagine it wasn't just plucked out of the air.
Yes, through the chair. In creating this policy, we did review quite a number of other regional district policies for this exact thing. And we did find that as an example in several other policies.
Thank you.
Jump in there. I don't see any other hands, but it's a percentage number and it's in the beginning and the application process. And the board will make decisions on each one of those. And they can change that at the agreement stage at the end if they think it's necessary. And if the difference between 5 and 15% may or may not be small depending on the size of the operation. There's a lot of things in here that can be decided through the process or before an agreement is made that I think will answer the questions for each particular system. Everyone's going to be different. Some will be, maybe 50 years old, and other ones might have been just built this year, and everyone will be different that the board thinks about. Is there anyone else who wants to chip in? Well, the question then, all those in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Unanimously. We move on to new business. Report for the Ukraine, opportunity for directors to discuss.
Thank you, Chair. When this came out before, I asked our manager of emergency services to do a little research, and I believe he's able to provide us the results of the research.
Mr. Thomas, do you have an answer?
Yes, I do, Chair. We have had a couple weeks here to look at options, and we can offer the board a couple options. One being that there is a foundation in Burnaby, Defend Ukraine Foundation, that would be willing to receive quality but expired fire department personal protective equipment, helmets, turnout gear, etc. And they would ship that on through another NGO based out of Edmonton, likely, that would get to firefighters in Ukraine. We would bear the costs of getting it to Burnaby, but compared to initially where we were trying to figure out the logistics and costs of getting it to Poland, this is a lot better. So that's, we've collected gear from both the North Side and the Malaspina Volunteer Fire Departments. The chief of the Gillies Bay Volunteer Fire Department also has indicated they've got a few sets of gear, probably approximately 200 pounds worth of gear that we've calculated around probably $500 worth of shipping costs to get to Burnaby. And then on to Ukraine, but not at our cost after that. Alternately, we've looked at an option, and the board could look at a financial contribution to an organization like the Red Cross.
Right. It was ahead of time.
Anyone else? Director Brown.
Oh, Chair, I'll make a motion that we send our assembled gear down to the Defund Ukraine Foundation.
It looks like our corporate officer has a motion all prepared.
Oh,
to be put up on the screen.
I'm sure it's what I said.
I think this includes the Gillies Bay Improvement District, if I can through the chair, could participate and share their cost of shipping.
Okay. Was there a seconder for the motion?
Yeah.
Director Leishman? Any discussion on that? I'm just going to chip in, and it looks like we've already collected some gear and it's ready to ship, and we know what the weight is. And I'm thinking that actually time matters in this situation. I think we've had more time to do things like that than I thought we would, frankly, from the beginning of this situation, and I'd like to get it going quickly. So, I support this resolution. I think it's a good thing to do, but I think getting it done as quickly as possible is the important part.
Yep.
Don't see anyone else with their hands up. So all those in favor of the resolution? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. 2 items, sir. Director Paul.
Thank you, Chair. I just like to, well, first of all, I think sending firefighting equipment is great, but I also think we should consider a financial assistance, either to the Red Cross Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal or to the Doctors Without Borders. I think either of those would be good. And I see the draft resolution. So I was thinking about amounts, and I know Director Leishman said the city gave $1,000. The number that popped in my head, and I'm thinking about the intense suffering that has been happening there. And I'd like to hear from other directors what they would be willing to donate. But my wish would be that we could donate $1 per person. Now that's probably too much of a reach, and it may be too much of a reach. So I'd like to hear what other directors would say and where we could get that funding from. But I'm willing to, for Lasquiti's part, put forth. I think $1,000 could be, and I can confirm with Ms. Green, and whether $1,000 from the Area E grant and aid would be feasible. And that would be $2 a person from Lasquiti, so it would be something. And if we could, any amount that we can agree on to send from our grants and aid, I'm happy with, and I know it would be very well used to help with humanitarian efforts.
Director McCormick.
Yeah, following along that same thought, our population in Area D has just gone up to about $1,100. And I believe, 1,100 people. And I believe that it would be appropriate for $1 a person to come out of the Area D grant and aid toward this purpose. And I'm wondering, does that have to go through our granting process, Chair, or can we just simply make a motion to do this?
I will ask the corporate officer if the board can just off the cuff make decisions in motion about grant and aid contributions.
Thank you, through the chair. Of course, the board can make choices about grant and aid. I think, though, that question might be better suited to Linda Green and where it would be funded from.
Well, right now we don't know how much funding or where the suggestions are. The question was, could we make a motion to fund it through a grant and aid? Ms. Greenan, do you want to contribute anything to that discussion?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the board has the authority to provide grants and aid within the community or outside of the community. And, we do have a policy, but the board has the authority to make a decision outside of that policy.
Anyone else? Dr. Gisborne.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I've just been wondering that if we start taking the money from individual electoral area grant and aids, we've already passed our budget. We've set how much funding has been set aside for individual grant and aid, but we don't know how much is going to be asked from us this year. I believe Area B's grant and aid is $16,000. So granting money from Area B grant and aid and individual electoral area grant and aid, it depletes the funds where other local community initiatives will most likely be coming and asking for funding, because coming out of COVID, there's a lot of organizations that are looking to get back up on their feet, and they might need some extra funding. So I want to send what I can to the Ukraine through Red Cross. I believe the federal government was matching donations up until March 18th. If we donate funding, is there any option for getting matching funding from the federal government, which was done previously? Or is this our dollar is just our dollar? It doesn't really get matched with anyone else. That's my concerns expressed, and that's my question about, is there any option for matching funding from the federal government, which there had been. Thank you, Chair.
Does anyone in staff know if there is matching funding available from another level of government? I don't see any other hands. I'm going to make a suggestion. I'm going to try this out, see how people look at it. Because I don't think actually the funding question is as urgent as the fire equipment question was. I think it might be appropriate for this group to ask staff to come back with a report on the possibility of allocating funds from grants and aid to send a cash donation to the Red Cross for the Ukraine. I'm thinking that might be a reasonable way to work that. I see everybody searching around to try to find some idea about what to do. And I think maybe a staff report, an idea of where we sit in grants and aid might help us to do that. Director McCormick?
Thank you. Would that staff report be presented at the same time? And is there time for staff to do this and present it at the same time as the other grant requests are being presented?
Yeah, could you answer that?
Through the chair, the question that was in my mind, not to go, not to defer the question, was whether or not you wanted it in time for the board meeting.
Yeah. Yeah. I would like to see it in time for the board meeting.
Okay, I hesitate to put additional pressure on Linda Green, but I don't think that would be difficult for her to give you guys a quick tally as to what could be available out of each electoral area, and then see if the population formula fits.
Ms. Greenan, we're asking a lot for you in a short time, so do you think it can be done?
Yes, I could prepare the report in time for the board. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks. So
I'll make the motion as suggested if our corporate officer has the wording.
Jones perhaps can write that out in some kind of reasonable way. We're asking for a report on how to get the money from grants and aid.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I have scribbled it down here.
Okay. Any more discussion?
Do you have a seconder? Sorry.
First, Director Brabazon. All those in favor? Any opposed? On a string of unanimous decisions tonight.
Question period.
We are right under question period. So there are no members of the public in the room. Is Mr. Galinsky on from the peak? With us today? Well, he can call me up and ask me any questions he wants. So, I think it's appropriate to have an adjournment. Thank you very much. That was a very efficient meeting for us.
Thank you, everybody. Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Good stuff. Pretty happy about that. That's his finance committee.